Have you considered stepping back from the SNP?
I've done nothing wrong.
Welcome to WatchMojoUK, and today we'll be looking at 10 times politicians were arrested.
Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
For this list, we're looking at times British politicians were arrested. They don't have to have served prison time, but do have to have at least been taken in for questioning.
Lord Archer won £500,000 in damages when the Daily Star suggested he'd slept with a prostitute to whom he had paid £2,000 to leave the country.
Let us know in the comments if you've ever been arrested. The Expenses Scandal. In 2009, Westminster was scrutinised like never before when the details of MP expenses came out.
MPs were always underpaid, going back into the 1980s and 90s.
It was a long road to get this information public, and eventually the full lists of what expenses MPs had claimed for were published in the papers.
So what had happened was the whips had quietly said to MPs, look, just push through some expenses claims of this and that.
Not only were dozens forced to apologise or even resign over what they'd done, but half a dozen politicians had criminal charges of false accounting brought against them.
We gave commitments to Parliament that we were treating the information, which we did, very sensitively. We had every MP's private address, bank details, we had everything.
Labour MP Margaret Moran was found to have fraudulently claimed back £53,000, though when she was found unfit to enter a plea, she was given a sentence of 2 years of psychiatric treatment. Some of the others, like David Chater, got jail sentences as long as 18 months. Nicola Sturgeon.
Scotland's hugely influential former First Minister was arrested this afternoon by police investigating alleged misuse of funds.
In June 2023, former First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, was brought in for questioning by the police. This came shortly after Sturgeon shocked the country by resigning in February, and then a massive fraud inquiry into the SNP's finances was launched.
Police Scotland confirmed in the last few hours that a 52-year-old woman has been arrested as a suspect.
Weeks prior, her husband, Peter Murrell, was also arrested as part of the probe to find out what exactly had happened to £600,000 in public donations to the party. Sturgeon was released without charge after being questioned by the police, and the investigation is still ongoing. It might take years to unravel what's actually happened.
What I will say is reiterate the statement I issued last Sunday. I am certain that I have done nothing wrong.
Terry Fields. The 1980s were beleaguered by many political scandals under Thatcher's leadership, but one wedge issue that everybody had an opinion on was the poll tax.
Councils across the South East are still reeling from the shock of Norman Lamont's decision to slash £140 from poll tax bills.
People were furious about having to pay a fixed-rate tax to their local authority instead of one based on the value of their house.
At 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, staff in the poll tax department at Labour Lewisham Council in South London completed 3 solid months of frantic work preparing new bills.
One man who notoriously opposed the policy was Labour MP Terry Fields, who was handed a 60-day sentence for refusing to pay his poll tax, which came to £373.
Councils have today been forced to halt the printing and posting of hundreds of thousands of poll tax bills.
He was eventually kicked out of the party for this, but some members of the public still celebrate Fields for taking a stand against such an unpopular policy. Miranda Grell. Back in 2006, Miranda Grell was a Labour candidate running for a council seat in London, and she came in 3rd place and did become a councillor. However, the following year she found herself in court for accusing one of her rival councillors, Liberal Democrat Barry Smith, of being a nonce. It seemed like she made these claims to lots of local residents while on the campaign trail, allegations that had absolutely no basis in fact, and, considering Smith was gay, were drenched in homophobia. She was found guilty, lost her appeal, and Labour refused to pay her legal fees. Today, Grell still works as a barrister, which is a little ironic. Jonathan Aitkin.
It's been 26 years since Jonathan Aitkin wielded his simple sword of truth and then lied and lied and lied.
A Tory MP for 20 years and a cabinet minister in the 1990s, Aitkin had a lot of credentials. But then The Guardian ran a story that he'd been taking advantage of his political position to do backdoor deals with Saudi Arabia.
Now, having been to prison, found God and started work as a vicar, he's in a better position to provide counsel to MPs.
This was quickly turned into a TV documentary, and Aitkin had enough, going after The Guardian for libel. The case was thrown out when it was revealed Aitkin had been lying to the court, and he was later brought into court again, this time as the defendant, on charges of perjury and perverting the course of justice. He pled guilty and later went bankrupt, then claimed to have found God and became a reverend.
Did prison and finding your vocation change your view of your own conduct?
Yes, enormously so.
Chris Huhne. In 2003, Chris Huhne landed a speeding ticket and apparently convinced his wife, Vicky Price, to take the fall and accept the licence points instead.
Very clearly I should not have swapped points with my ex-wife.
This is, of course, illegal, and 8 years later, Price went to the papers with this story about her husband.
And people should believe you this time because you're admitting to having been a liar.
After a lot of back and forth between Essex Police and the CPS about whether charges should be pressed, Huhne resigned, and he and his now ex-wife did go to court over it, both getting handed 8-month sentences.
It's hard to imagine there could be much more. I mean, the details that people saw were awful.
Yes, they certainly were, but you have to remember, sadly, that was police evidence.
He was only in prison for 2 months, but upon release was humiliatingly made to wear an ankle tag. Lord Archer.
We were given false assurances by Jeffrey Archer, and as soon as we've had an allegation about him that has been substantiated and shown to be true, we've acted quickly and correctly.
In 1987, Jeffrey Archer, Tory peer, found himself in hot water with the tabloids after allegedly paying a call girl for her services to the tune of £2,000. Though the story first broke in the News of the World, it was the Daily Star that escalated the situation, and it was the Star that Archer decided to sue for libel.
Jeffrey Archer was clearly desperate to become mayor of this city, but few thought he'd make it to the end of the race.
He won, but 12 years later it came out that he'd lied, and he was arrested and charged in the year 2000 for perjury.
Lord Archer's wife and son went out and left him at home tonight. This is the most profound disgrace he's ever been in.
He was given 4 years in prison, though most of these prisons were very lax, and upon release, turned his prison experiences into multiple lucrative books. Jeremy Thorpe, the architect behind the baffling Rinkergate scandal. Jeremy Thorpe found himself arrested on conspiracy to murder in the late 1970s.
Politicians knew all about Thorpe and Scott, Bessel says.
It appeared that Thorpe, leader of the Liberal Party, had hired someone to assassinate his former gay lover, Norman Scott, after Scott threatened to out him.
Mr. Thorpe and 3 other men, Mr. David Holmes, a former Deputy Treasurer of the Liberal Party, Mr. George Deakin and Mr. John Le Mesurier, are charged with plotting to kill Mr. Scott.
The assassination attempt was a failure, as the man Thorpe hired was useless, managing only to shoot Scott's dog, Rinker, before fleeing and leaving his target alive. The trial descended into farce, with nobody involved being a credible witness, and so Thorpe was acquitted, but he more or less had to retire from public life afterwards.
Sir David said, "Doesn't that strike you as a singularly stupid idea?" Bessel said, "I can't comment, but it didn't seem stupid to me at the time." Jeremy Thorpe was under great strain.
Patrick Rock. In 2014, Patrick Rock, special advisor to David Cameron during his premiership, was arrested and eventually convicted of possessing indecent images of minors. It wasn't the first time, and it probably won't be the last, that a British government official has been brought up on charges like this. Rock went through a highly publicised trial throughout 2016, and after all that, was only given a conditional discharge. Some saw this as a gross miscarriage of justice, as Rock really faced no punishment for his crimes, though all his honours were revoked and his career was ended. John Stonehouse. In 1974, following a raft of scandals, including allegations he was a Czech spy and a very poorly thought out affair with his secretary, John Stonehouse decided enough was enough.
I agree, yes, that the figures there have been somewhat disappointing.
He disappeared without a trace from a beach in Miami and was, for a while, presumed dead, in reality going to Australia.
I can't pretend that everything has gone just as I would have expected or hoped.
His scheme lasted for a little over a month before he was arrested, though bizarrely, Australian police thought Stonehouse was actually Lord Lucan, a man who really did disappear without a trace after the mysterious murder of his nanny.
Well, if you continue to take that attitude, quite unreasonably in my view, there's plainly nothing I can do, is there?
Stonehouse wasn't Lucan, and he was sent back to the UK, where he was put on trial for a bevy of charges, including fraud, and then sentenced to 7 years behind bars.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojoUK, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.